How we doing today, Potsy?
Doing great, Greg. How you doing?
Doing good, man. Mark Carman makes his illustrious return to Chicago sports media. He was at the U.S. Open all week, big timing it with Nick Wright and Danny Parkins.
No. They were big timing it with me. Let's get it straight. I mean, they're slightly more successful in their careers, but I'm the guy at the U.S. Open. Potsy, great to see you. I know you were doing I think there was another podcast with this Adam Hogue guy and this Adam Johns that you were also on today. You're a busy man. We appreciate you making time.
Sure, we're going to do a better job.
Yeah. Well, I actually wanted to start with the Ryan Poles press conference, which I didn't, have the benefit of being at, but I'm, going through it and just picking out some quotes here that I wanted to get the Mark Potash honest reaction to. And okay, so my biggest concern with the team, Potsy, is up front, right? And I'll just read you Poles' quote. And this, we're talking about the offensive line, not the defensive line. Quote, "This is the best depth I've ever had. When we let one of the guys go on cutdowns, I said, man, you did an excellent job. I wish we could keep you here." And then he said, "This is the deepest room I've ever been a part of. We have more versatility, more depth. Shoot, we have 10 guys I feel comfortable. Obviously, you want your starting five healthy and ready to go, but I feel more confident in our O-line than I ever have before." Did your antenna go up during that moment? Like, really? Do you actually believe that? And if so, then maybe I'm missing something. Maybe the O-line is in a much better place than I think they are.
Well, he was asked specifically about depth, I think, which is why he approached that. But depth isn't the Bears' issue, to tell you the truth, in the offensive line. It's continuity, what he referred to at the end. And it really doesn't matter whether Ryan Bates is the center or the guard, or whether Nate Davis is the right guard or Ryan Bates is. None of that really matters. Those are interchangeable pieces. What matters is that all five of them play together every single game. That's what the Bears need. They've had, I go over this stat every time. They've had 18 different starting lineups in 34 games. That's more than half. They've never had the same starting lineup 4 times in a row. They've never had the same group together for more than 137 snaps in 2 years. I mean, that's just not unless you have 5 All-Pros or 7 All-Pros, that's not a recipe for success. And even though the Bears have led the league in rushing, or second, I can't remember what the number was, the pass protection just is where it hurts the most, and that's been evident. So I go back to, the depth is great, but when you throw a new guy in there, he's still a new guy, and that's still and the more important thing is to have 5 just above average guys playing together than it is to have a couple of anchors and all mixing and matching all season. My history shows that, going back to the Peyton era. So I think the biggest thing I got out of that is really what they need is something they don't control for the most part, and that's continuity.
And just for the record, I'm sorry, Greg, just for the record, the Bears were second last year as far as running the football, 141.1, just ahead of the Niners and behind the Ravens, who were at the top. Go ahead, Brex.
Yeah, and I was going to piggyback off that point, Mark, because when we were talking about comparisons of quarterbacks that have had successful years, and then talking about the Bears quarterbacks, Jay Cutler's most successful year, the most successful offensive year I've ever seen, the 2013 Chicago Bears under Mark Trestman. To your point, the offensive line, all 5 guys started all 16 games together, and it didn't consist of Pro Bowlers. It had 2, Jordan Morgan and Kyle Long and Matt Slauson and Jermon Bushrod, certainly guys that aren't,
good players, but good,
right. They're not making the Hall of Fame.
And not interrupt, I'm sorry to interrupt, but even further to the point, Chris Morgan, the only time Chris Morgan in like 8 seasons has had that same situation, all 5 starters start every game. His quarterback was the MVP of the league, and the Falcons went to the Super Bowl and only lost because they had breakdowns in the offensive line. Their center and one of their tackles got hurt, and that cost them ultimately at the end, when they had the game in their hand, had a negative rush, a hold, a sack, and couldn't kick a field goal that would have put the game on, not on ice, but certainly would have almost clinched that game. So even not just the Bears, but almost every team, you can always pinpoint continuity is a key to success, and Chris Morgan knows it as well as anyone else.
Mark Potash, Chicago Sun-Times with the Potsy. Everyone's talking about when you speak, people listen that you know what you're talking about. A lot of love for you on the CHGO Bears podcast. Can you slide just a drop to your right, Potsy? I want to get you in the center of the screen so you look more even.
Yeah. Do I
There
move
you
my
go. We want to see.
Okay.
Yeah, now you're there. We want the whole face. This is you deserve a good
okay.
good
With
little.
the tight
Wa-
screen, we don't get the old school TV in the background, but that's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah,
We'll
sorry
let it.
about that.
No, you're fine, and we appreciate you. I just want you, your quadrant should look as pristine as you are.
Okay.
All right, so here we started the show with what is a successful season for Caleb Williams. So let me just ask you that direct question, Mark. What if you were going to try to define that ahead of week 1 here in the Titans? What would you say?
With all the circumstances taken into account, I expect him to be better than Mitch Trubisky or Justin Fields ever were with the Bears. And it's not as low a bar as you think, because in 2018, Trubisky, had like a 95.4, I think it was 95.4 pass rating, which was middle of the pack. It wasn't great, but he averaged 230 yards. The Bears obviously won games, and he made the Pro Bowl as an alternate. But in the big picture, that's certainly something that he can accomplish, again, with all the circumstances that should be in his favor. And also, Fields' best year was last year. I think the number was 247 or 250 total yards per game. He should definitely be able to do that. But there's little things that, can he be better in the fourth quarter than he was in the first, which the Bears were horribly bad at last year? Can he win games in the end? Can he win shootouts? There's many other factors that go into it. I don't know how that figures out, but if you're looking for just statistical, I would say at the very least, at the lowest, I expect him to be better than any Bears quarterback has been since Cutler.
Well, and you know how we are as Bears fans, we get lost in the sauce in the offseason and overhype ourselves on things that we're dreaming of that never actually come to fruition. And we've done this with many quarterbacks, many teams here in the past, certainly of recent. So with all the hype surrounded by around this team and this quarterback specifically, are you buying it? Do you think that that bar that you set, or even beyond that, is something that you believe will happen?
Yeah, I think it will. I think unless they have unless the crazy things happen, injuries and whatever all the other stuff that usually happens at Hales Hall, but yeah, I think it's very doable. Excuse me. It's not pie in the sky. It's not asking too much. That's kind of the theme, I think, of this year, is that relative to other years, not to get too far off track, but you're asking, for instance, you're not asking for too much. It's a big difference asking like Kyler Gordon and Jaquan Brisker to take the next step than it is to ask for Adam Shaheen to have a breakout season, because he never showed that he could do that anyway. So you're asking things that I think are more expectation than hope. And I think the quarterback goes along with that based on what I've seen so far, which is him already making plays that Justin Fields and Mitch Trubisky could not make, and having better talent around him to take advantage of those situations, and having a play caller who's had experience calling plays, and a defense that's going to keep you in the game. So if you go 3 and out 3 times in a row, you're not down 21-0. You're even, like you was against the Bengals. And I know that was not the Bengals' first team offense, but the point is that, it makes it a lot easier when you get out there that 3rd or 4th time and you're not down 14-0 to the Packers. You're 0-0, and that puts a little bit of heat on the defense to stop you. So you can't underestimate the impact of a good Bears defense helping Caleb Williams, giving him, just putting the wind at his back, which is what Bears quarterbacks, for the most part, except for Trubisky in 18, have not had.
All right, Mark, give me 2 things. One, your reason for optimism this year. What gives you confidence that Bears fans are going to enjoy this Bears season? And 2, give me your other side. What are your this could pop up and be a major reason for concern?
Reasons for optimism is just balance. I mean, defensively, they're good. I think they have potential to be pretty good eventually on offense. I think they're balanced enough on offense that they don't have to put everything on the rookie quarterback's shoulder. I think they also, they're good. They're going to be good. Not only are they good on defense, but they're balanced on defense. They have playmakers at all three levels. They have depth at they don't have depth at all three levels, but they have enough depth and versatility on their defense that they can cover up a few holes if they're not too big, like Sweat getting hurt or something. So I think there are they have more margin for error. Whereas if one thing is bad, there are other things that can make it look like if their offense is not great, I think their defense can help them out. I think eventually, if their offense isn't good, if their defense isn't good, I think their offense down the line will be able to help them out. There's a lot of potential there. So I just think they're just better balanced than most teams. Bears teams always seem to have some really major flaw, and right now, they're not perfect by any stretch, but I just think they have enough balance on offense, defense, and within their offense and defense that it's less likely for there to be the kind of breakdowns that have happened so often in the past. And as far as the negatives, it's just depth on the defensive line.
Yeah.
I think you lose Sweat or something, and you lose that pass rush. All of a sudden, that puts pressure on your back, your secondary, which should be good, but you put too much pressure on them. That's never a good thing. There's a chain reaction that can happen there. Even in the interior, they're number one. I think they were number one against the run last year. You lose Billings. You saw the moves they made this last week. That's, I wouldn't say sign of desperation, but it's a caution flag at the very least. And that shows you, they lose a guy like Billings and Dexter, or if Dexter doesn't take that next step, and Pickens is injured or whatever, and it doesn't develop, you might have issues there too. So defensive line, and then of course the big X factor, offensive line. Can they stay together? Already we're seeing them mix and match. 2 practices ago, they had like 6 different combinations with their number one offense just in the second practice to the second to last practice of training camp, 11 days before the start of the season. I think they'll be good if they play together. I think it's good enough. What they have is good enough. But that can go awry as well. And if it does, that's going to put even more the kind of pressure on Caleb Williams that they really don't want to have. And not that he can't rise above it, but so that's good. He's better. He can overcome it a lot better than either of the other two. Even though Fields was mobile, didn't have the ability to be mobile and turn it into a big play passing wise like Caleb Williams can. He can make, and I sorry to go off track here, but I always say he can make that one. If you got a left tackle, like for instance, I always say this: the Bears had Charles Leno was a really good left tackle, but he would make 1 or 2 mistakes a game, and you saw him every time. Because they would get Cutler killed. You got a guy at quarterback now who if Braxton Jones makes that 1 or 2 mistakes in a game, he can. You got a quarterback who can erase that, and then all of a sudden, all you have are his good plays. So your left tackle play is much better. So even though I'm saying that offensive line is a concern, and no doubt it is, I'm also saying that, part of the theme of this is why things look better than they have is you also have a quarterback who can erase some of these mistakes. And I think that's something that you don't want to necessarily lean on, but in those moments, you've got a guy who can do it. It just depends on when he gets to that level. Might be right away. It might be after the bye. Who knows? But it can happen.
It's interesting, I had actually forgotten this. The Bears were in the bottom half of the league as far as points allowed. Of course, their defense changed in the middle of the year, but they gave up 22 plus. There were 12 teams that gave up more, but they were number 1 in the league as far as yards on the ground, 86. Nobody was better than the Bears last year. Gregory, I know you got a bunch here that you want to get into.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with you. Like worst case scenarios, if you had to rank the players they can't afford to lose. A lot of people would just go to Caleb right away, but honestly, it's Montez Sweat 1, and you might be able to make the argument that it's Gervon Dexter and Andrew Billings 2 and 3, because if they lose that depth or the quality players at the top end of their defensive line, they're not going to be able to stop the run. They're not going to be able to get to the pass rush, and now it's a trickle-down effect to everything else. And so if you had to lose a guy for a couple games, God forbid, but that's what happens. You saw last year Tyson Bagent able to come in and win 2 of the 4 games he played in, and he's looking even better here this year. Just the nature of the game, though, when you got to deal with injuries at times. So moving over to Matt Eberflus, when he spoke to the media, he certainly has had like this makeover here this offseason with his, not only his looks, but his reputation, right? And you see Travis Kelce at the end of the Chiefs game on Hard Knocks, like, hey man, I love what you're doing over here. And it wasn't that long ago where Kelce was mic'd up saying, I don't know who this guy is. And so it just kind of shows you like how much he has kind of changed the perspective of him. And so to me, my question is, okay, I see that he's made adjustments. He's adapting. I see how he develops players. I can give him the credit where credit is due. But at the end of the day, how he manages the games week to week and executes those play calls in the fourth quarter in situational moments, I still have questions there. And when he was talking to you guys in the media, Jason Leisure asked him, like, how much self-evaluation have you done with your game management skills? And he said, not much. And that for me, it was like a little thing, but I was like, man, that's interesting. You got a lot of confidence in yourself, because to my eyes, he made a few more mistakes than I thought he should have made last year.
Yeah, Greg, I don't think it was as acute as you would think, or as previous coaches have had. I didn't notice that he had a huge game management. For one thing, he wasn't in all that many situations where he could show one way or another. I will say, I think the makeover, whatever you want to call it, is mostly cosmetic at this point. We don't know how he's going to handle those late game situations, how he'll handle the quarterback situation, or the offense struggling, or whatever. All these things, these managerial things, and even in the games, we don't know that. So, we'll see that as it happens. But right now, it's an unknown. And I'll be honest, I don't think Eberflus's seat is going to be as hot as people think. I just think this team has a pretty high floor, and I don't think it's going to be the kind of disaster that people are going to think like last year when they started 0-4 and were horrible. I just don't. I mean, they can start out 1-3. I mean, but I just don't think it's going to be the disaster that was last year, where you're going to make a change. And especially, it's still the guy that it's still Ryan Poles' guy. I think he's going to be loyal to him. I don't see Flus being in real trouble until he gets to a point where they're good, but they're not winning enough games. They're good. Some of these teams, and that takes a year, 2-3 years, where you become a winning team, but you can't get over the top. And which you see, to me, that's going to be the Eberflus issue. He's good enough at managing a culture, managing a team. He's not going to lose this team. That was all that coaching stuff was overrated last year. The things that happened as far as how it reflected on him, that was kind of BS to me, to tell you the truth. I didn't think that reflected on him. He just handled it poorly in answering questions about it. That made him look worse. But his managing of a team, he knows he knows what's important. And I think he's actually pretty good at that. So again, I don't see him being on the hot seat this season. I just don't see them being, like I said, as bad as Bears teams have been, where you think, oh, wow, you got to make a coaching change. So that's really been kind of off my radar, the whole Eberflus's status, because I know he's like, you could look around anywhere on the internet, and he's like first or second for the coach of the year, and first or second for the first coach to be fired. And those are legitimate odds, but I just think he's more likely to do to win the coach of the year than he is to be the first coach fired, because I just don't think the circumstances are going to be right for him, especially, and sorry to go long here, but especially if his defense is not the problem, because then if you're going to make a change, now you got to start all over. With your offensive coordinator, you got to start with a defense. It's just too much. It would be too much change. And again, I just don't see this being the disaster. And believe me, I've been wrong about this before. That would necessitate a change. So I guess that's my main thrust to answer your question, is that I just don't see Eberflus being just a big issue as far as on the downside. It's just a question of whether he can manage the games. And again, I hate to go on, but again, here's another case where the quarterback can make him look like a great coach.
Yep.
He hung in there with Caleb Williams through 4 or 5 series against the Bengals, and Caleb Williams made him look like a genius. And if not a genius, made him look like the right move, right? Well, players make a difference. I always go back to Matt Eberflus could be a Brian Billick. who to me was not a great head coach, but had a long career, won a Super Bowl, didn't even get his side of the ball right. He got the job because of Randy Moss and the Vikings offense. They never got that offense right, but he had a nice long run there with the Bears fans. The Bears fans would envy, including a Super Bowl, without really being a great coach, but a good kind of manager and a guy people like to play for. And I see Eberflus, at least right now, fitting into at least that mold, if not eventually becoming a really good coach. I mean, he's learning as he goes along. It's only his third season.
That's a great comp, and I like what you said at the start of that whole thing, that the improvement to this point has been cosmetic. We don't know. Maybe he'll be a better game manager. Maybe he'll have some breakthrough moments there. But we gotta play the games. Did anything surprise you, Mark, about the 53 roster decisions that they made?
No, I think I'll be honest. I think roster cuts and position battles are the most overrated part of training camp, because the bottom of the roster with 16 players on the practice squad, you're very rarely going to cut a guy who's going to come back and beat you. I remember one year they cut Cravon LeBlanc, and he ended up making a play against him in the playoff game with the Eagles. But I think the Lions had originally picked him up. But anyway, that's a rare case where you cut a guy who ends up coming back to haunt you. And even then, that was kind of minor. But in general, those guys, you can put them on the practice squad. Unless it's a total misevaluation, like maybe like in the middle of that one season where they had Raheem Mostert and they cut him, and now he's a really good player. But anyway, and also as far as position battles too, because when you got a position battle, because you got two even players, whether one or the other, I think the center position is a perfect example. Whoever won that, it doesn't matter. It's like, one year I think Roosevelt Colvin beat out Brian Urlacher at strong side linebacker. And that was a big, but it wasn't like Brian Urlacher wasn't going to make the team. He ended up being, actually pushed him into the right position because Barry Minter got hurt a couple weeks later. He was starting, and the rest is history. Casey Wegman beat out my first year, and Casey Wegman beat out Olin Kreutz. Olin Kreutz was a 21-year-old rookie. Casey Wegman, as it turned out, was a Pro Bowl center for the Chiefs. So it was two really two really good players. So anyway, I guess a long way of saying no, nothing on the 53, because the bottom of the roster, I think it's important to have depth, but I think with the practice squad, you can keep those guys on your team, and it's just not as significant, especially when your top of your roster is so much better now than it was with the roster they inherited from Ryan Pace 3 years ago.
So last one for me, Mark Potash, and so many things I appreciate about Potsy outside of this, the overall just good human being that you are, but the experience and everything else. Your antenna pops up in the room when people say things that are off, and then you tend to follow up and ask the questions. So I was, one of the parts from the press conference the other day with Poles, quote, I think it's special, like the group of guys. It's special. And I talked a lot about that. But even when we got through cut down days and you're letting guys go, they're like, man, I just want to be here. I can feel it. Like they have talked a lot about their culture. And I've underlined it a zillion times on the show. Like, in the Bears locker room, you got a bunch of good dudes. Like Chase Claypool stood out like a sore thumb last year because he just didn't fit in there because he was a pain in the ass. But I'm just curious, does your antenna come up at all here, Potsy? Like, you know what? I'm not so sure this tremendous Bears chemistry is actually what the Bears are kind of selling to us.
Yeah. I'll be honest. I kind of tune that out a little bit because it's so cliche. Everybody wants to have a good culture, just like the quarterback who, they love the quarterback because he hates to lose. Like, what quarterback doesn't hate to lose? So I mean, it's just, to me, it's like it's cliche. Is it good culture? I mean, it seems like it. I'll say this: those wide receivers. When you compare the wide receivers and the weapons they have to the wide receiver room they had when they had Alshon Jeffrey and Brandon Marshall and Martellus Bennett and Jay Cutler. And now you look at what they have now with DJ Moore and Keenan Allen and Caleb Williams and DeAndre Swift and Cole Kmet. Rome, you talk about. I mean, it's surprising. Those are really good guys. Those are good guys. Those are good players, not just good guys. I think that makes a difference. I think that's better because, as you saw, all that talent they had with Bennett, they all went haywire on him. Even Alshon did at the end, and that was very short-lived. That's the best. Greg, you mentioned it before, the 2013. That's the best group of offensive players the Bears have had since the Ditka era, and yet look how short-lived and how unsatisfying it was. My point is, this group, you talk about culture, these are really good guys. I mean, we got to wait and see. But I mean, even when Keenan Allen said, was asked about like DJ Moore getting a contract and the Bears wanted to wait and see, we'll see what happens down the road. But he was good with it. He was fine with it. And that's a good thing from a wide receiver, as you've seen in San Francisco and other places.
Yep.
I'm almost looking forward to the Bears having issues like that, frankly, because that means they're good. But right now they don't. And my point is that they have a really good room in that particular thing, because those receivers, including Odunze, I think is going to be a good player. Those are really good guys. So in that respect, I do pay attention to it because I think it's a good example of their star players just being better guys to have on your team than the group they had before, which were, if they weren't bad guys, they were just kind of inherently dysfunctional. Like a guy like Cutler, who I think, not the word, a good guy. I think he's a good guy, misunderstood. But boy, he just did not suffer fools gladly, didn't get along with people very well, was easily annoyed, and just made it very difficult for him to be successful. And I think you have a better group of guys to do it. So to answer your question in a long roundabout way, I think, in that respect, if it holds, which I think it could, I think this new culture is a good thing. But I'll be honest, it's because you've got really good players too. Like I always say, Caleb Williams teaches you how to win. You didn't need Justin Fields, to learn how to win. You needed players who teach you how to win. Like, good players teach you how to win.
I think that was an excellent underlining, because you could certainly make the argument that Brandon and Alshon and Martellus are better than what they have right now. But it went sideways because they were nuts.
Yeah. All in their own way too,
Yeah. So.
Yeah. And Jay was a misunderstood guy, but just difficult to win with everywhere from the very beginning to the end. And that's what you don't want. And I think you have a chance to have the polar opposite of that in Caleb Williams from what I've seen so far. I'll say that right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, at the end of the day, talent is going to lift all tides. So even though they had some dysfunction, they were still good teams, but they weren't Super Bowl caliber teams, maybe because of A, some bad luck, and B, not having that right chemistry. So you're hoping that the talent and the chemistry combined here will lead to some success that Bears fans haven't seen in a long time. My final question for you before we let you jet here, Potsy, listening to you with Hogan Johns earlier, and you did such a great job with them, but I know that you're enjoying your time here with us more. Is that you said that it was, I know that. You don't even have to say it. I can see it on your face. So to me, one of the things that stood out to me when you guys were talking about Eberflus and Poles really emphasizing how Caleb needs to play point guard, and that's you. I think you said that's paramount. That's the foundation of this year, is to let Caleb Williams not make him have to do too much. But my question is that something that they can actually do, where you're balancing developing Caleb properly versus calling plays to win games? And I look at week 1 as kind of a perfect example of this. As much as, hey, we're going to run the ball and we're not going to put too much on Caleb's plate in the first 2 quarters. Well, the Titans defense is going to probably stop the run. They have a very good defensive line. So that leads me to believe they are going to start throwing the ball like right away, because out of necessity to move the chains. So how realistic is it to have a healthy way of developing Caleb, but calling plays to try to win games in a season that has a lot of high expectations?
Well, I think it's a good point, Greg. And I think the key thing is you have a quarterback who, if he has the ability to at least rise above that and do it. You just don't want to put it on him every single time. I don't know. I'll be honest. I really don't know how it's going to work. All I know is their goal is to put him it's even not so much a play calling thing. Well, they want to put him in advantageous down and distance situations, and I always put him behind the sticks and create plays like that. And I think that Waldron's really good at that. I think he's very cognizant of that. They rarely talk about third downs. They don't want to even be in third down. And so they want it. So I think that's where it is, where they really want to take the heat off him by just putting him in better situations. And if teams are going to stop the run, that's going to, in theory, you have a quarterback who knows how to take advantage of that. I think we've seen indications that he knows how to read a defense better than Justin Fields did, and knows how to react to what a defense is giving him. Like there was a play in I think it was a Buffalo game, where he had like Simba Webster open early, and then he threw that nice pass to Kmet late, and he made a decision. And those two factors there. One thing, he's got to be able to find that open man early and be able to pull the trigger on that, which is something Fields couldn't do, and then find the other guy late. Well, then I think I remember Dave Wannstedt said on the score or whatever that, that deep play to Kmet is not going to be there. So it's really not as, I think his point was that, like, it's not as, it's something that you shouldn't go crazy over. But the point is the decision making. It's the fact that this guy saw that there was a better play open, and when there isn't a better play open, he'll throw to Simba Webster and get it. So I think they're counting on him being that kind of quarterback, as opposed to a guy who just drops back every time, looks for two guys deep, and tries to make the big play. I'm not sure if that's where you were getting at, but I'm just saying I don't know exactly how that's going to work out. But there are going to be times where he's going to have to kind of rise above it and lift this team. But I think they want to minimize those things. I think that's the key. And they have a quarterback who can do that. The question is, do they have the team, the running game, the versatility, and the playmakers to be able to take the heat off him? And, that's what the first 6 games before the bye are all about. And, this first game is really a great – you couldn't ask for a better – test, a better start for a rookie quarterback.
Yep.
First games are, I can't say are defining, but this is going to tell us an awful lot about where they are as an offense, because they should actually be pretty productive in the first game and not just skimp by.
Potsy, Brad,
I didn't answer your question, Greg. Sorry.
No. That was good.
Well, Greg appreciates everything, and he's told me before the show that he's going to buy you as many pints as you want in London, and we'll of course see you before then. And then we'll see you also, Potsy. We'll see you in New Orleans, come February. So look, this is really just get ready for a long grind this year.
Was that the NBA All-Star game, or
isn't the Super Bowl in New Orleans this year, buddy?
Okay,
well,
sorry.
hey, and you didn't tell. You haven't told us yet when how many days till locker cleanup?
Actually, I did early in the year. I had I can't remember what the number was. It was 176, but it took you to the day after the wild card game.
Okay.
Oh, I didn't. We did.
You had to do the math.
Oh,
yeah.
Getting creative. Creative.
It's funny. I was thinking, we're talking. This is a time where you talk about predictions, and I think I've been on like 10-7. But when I go to the press conferences and listen to the press conferences, I'm like at 11-6, and then I go out and watch practice, and I'm at like 9-8. Because it like brings me back down to earth, when I see guys leaving, just things happening the way it is. So it's really hard to tell. I'm sticking with right now 10-7, but with a better chance to be over that than under. I'll say that, and you can, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. The Bears have disappointed so often that it's hard to be optimistic, but from what I've seen, I am optimistic. I think 10-7 is reasonable, and I think there's a better chance that they go above that than they go below it.
Wow,
they've never let us down before, so there's no reason to feel.
Yeah, well, they have, but I guess I'm buying into the Caleb Williams thing. So we'll see if I got to pull the Charlie Brown Lucy football.
No, it feels right. It feels right. You know it when you see it. And as a long-suffering Cubs fan that finally got to see a championship, certainly Cubs fans that suffered a lot longer than me, the year that 2015, the year before they finally won it, you could tell that those guys were a little different and their chemistry was a little different. And all those past failed teams that we hoped were going to work out, they didn't.
Guys coming in right off the bat, which had never happened before. Guys used to just get suffocated, and then all of a sudden these guys are coming up for it and producing. That was a good sign. Yeah.
Yep.
So, but I am a skeptic, though. I've been at this so long. I'm such a skeptic. I think the Bears are going to be good. You watch. This will be the one. It's going to beat them. It's going to burn them. The kicker. Because that because when they were good, they had kicking problems, and ever since they've been bad, their kicking has been fabulous, right? It's been over 90%, better than Robbie Gould. It's just be the Bears' luck. This is the year that that Cairo Santos has an issue. And I was got to say, he missed more kicks in training camp than he ever has.
That's true.
Don't you put that evil on us, Mark?
Yeah, I should. This is probably the wrong venue to have that take, but it's just I'm just telling you, just that's how a skeptic thinks. Is there's always something that will go wrong with the Bears. You can't. It's unavoidable.
But this is the most optimistic you've been since.
Probably 19. I think I was sold on 19. At that point, we thought Trubisky was going to take the next step, and he had the best defense in the NFL. That should have been it. And as it turned out, the defense had peaked. It was still good, but they lost Fangio, which was a factor, and Trubisky just lost, was just not as good. So I'm not gonna, I think 19, we were all pretty optimistic.
Yeah. All right, Mark, you're the best. We'll see you. We'll see you this week. Okay.
Okay, guys. Good talking to you, and we'll see you down the road.
Yep.
Great.
Love you, Marcus.
Okay,
you're the best, Mark.
Yep.
Mark Potash for the Chicago Sun-Times.
We all silly like the mayor.